Here are 7 watch collecting tips that you should know before starting your watch journey. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison as always, and I have been in the luxury watch industry now for about 8 years. I started my collecting journey about 7 years ago, so about 1 year after I started working in the trade, and I have got a couple of tips for you beginners out there that you should know before starting your journey. Try before you buy is the very first point that we're going to cover, and it's probably one of the most important topics that we're going to cover in this video, apart from the last two. They're pretty important. But there's been a study recently, and this was in the fast fashion industry, but the same rules apply, on returns rates amongst retailers. Now, when you purchase something in store, the return rate on average is about 5 to 10%, which is pretty low. Then when you take that to online purchases, the returns rate shoots up to 25%, just over 25% actually. That is over a quarter of people that purchase online return that product. Now, this study was done in the fast fashion industry, but when it's reflective in the luxury industry, the stakes are higher. You're paying more money for said product, so the stakes by their nature go up. Now, the reason that these returns happen is because things online can be perceived differently to what they actually look and feel like. And this is very prevalent in, let's say, Grand Seiko. Actually, let's take one of the most popular brands in the world. Let's take Omega. And let's take the new Omega Seamaster Seaweed Green. Online, it looks bright. It looks vibrant green, almost reflective green. It's very, very bright. Whereas on the wrist, it's so much more wearable. It's almost like a dark forest green, and in certain lights it looks black, and the renders online never do the product justice in person. So the first point is try before you buy. Next up is another pretty important one. It's sentimental attachment, and it's always have sentimental attachment to your watch, no matter what it is, no matter where you get it from. The most important thing is that you have sentimental attachment to your watch. There is nothing worse in my eyes than when someone comes into the store or goes online or asks me on the Chisholm Hunter Instagram or whatever it is about a watch, and they've done no background research, they have no sentimental attachment, they just have money and they like the style. And what normally ends up happening is these people buy these watches and then in a year's time, 2 years' time, they sit in the safe and they never get worn because there's no sentimental attachment to the watch. To me, watches should always represent memories. They should represent moments in time, moments in your life that you always think back on. Graduations, important dinners, birthdays, anything that you can look back on and reflect in a positive manner. And I'm going to tell you a personal story here, a personal story about my new watch, which is actually the Seiko 538mm Peanuts, which is a weird watch for me because I was never really a Seiko fan, but there was a couple of changes in my life. Over about 3 years, I worked on my photography and videography, and I connected my identity to photography and videography. I wanted to work with Canon. I wanted to hit the pinnacle of videography and photography and work with Canon, and I worked and worked and worked until I got there. As soon as I worked with Canon, as soon as I worked with that big brand that I'd been dreaming of for years, I realized that it's not really where I found my sense of happiness. My sense of happiness was through day-to-day stuff, talking to you guys, working on the podcast, the Into the Mind podcast, working on my personal photography as a hobby, not a job. And so I wanted something that represented that switch, that grounding of myself and realizing where happiness actually came from, because it's not all from work. So I decided to get the Seiko Peanuts. And so whenever I look at this watch, I'm reminded of being grounded, and I'm reminded that happiness is all around, not just in my work. Coming up next, we have the fact that size isn't everything. Now, don't get any ideas, I know what you're thinking. But basically what happens in the industry is everyone has this perception of what size fits them, and they don't go above or below that. Now, for me, that was 42mm, I would never go above it, and it was about 39, 38mm, I would never go below. And I had this thing in my mind that whenever I went into a store, I didn't want to try anything above or below that point on. Red flag, as soon as that came up. But through the years, it only took me 7 years, but through the years and through maturing, I realized that size isn't everything. And smaller sizes and bigger sizes do fit your wrists better than you might think. This really hit home for me probably about a year ago. We began to stock IWC a bit prior to that in Chisholm Hunter, and I tried on the IWC Big Pilot, thinking it's going to be far too big. There's no chance that this will fit, because I've got this perception in my head that there's just no way that it'll fit. I got it on the wrist, I tried it on, I did a watch vlog with it, you guys might have seen, and it totally changed my mind. And I realized that my whole construct of what fits on my wrist, logically in my head, was probably wrong. So my advice there is try it on. If you think it's slightly too big, that's okay, that's fine. You don't need to buy it, but why not try it on? And before I move on, I just need to say, that also goes the other way. It also goes towards the smaller side of things, the smaller side of the scale. Let's look at the Blancpain 54. It comes in at 37 mil. It's a small watch, especially for technically a diving watch is a very small watch. But so many people tried that on because it's Tudor, because it has that hype factor, and they realized that it fits pretty damn well. Next on the list is becoming part of the watch forums, becoming part of the community. You know, an amazing thing that watches allow you to do is connect with other people through joining a community. For example, the one you're in right now. In the comments of this video, you can have conversations with genuine people that have a genuine hobby and passion for watches. A lot of you guys know a lot more than me about watches. A lot of the time I look at the comments and you guys are educating me, not the other way around. So pick up education through these forums. Ask people about watches. Ask people about the fits of watches, the colors of watches versus the online colors of watches, the in-person versus online. All the little details that you might want to know, the community will help you, and that's what watches allow you to do. So get involved in the community, whether it's our community or someone else's, preferably ours. However, on that point, and I was actually going to make this a totally separate point itself, but I thought I'd just merge these two together. Remember that your opinion does not need to be the same as somebody else's. Everybody has different styles, different skin tones, different, patterns of faces that they like. There's tons of different stuff going on within the watch industry. For example, I like NATO strap. Drew likes bracelets. I like white faces. You might like blue faces. Everyone has different preferences, and don't let anybody's opinion influence yours. If you like something, go get it, and don't worry about what people think. Coming in at number 5, we have, this isn't a plug, I know it might seem like it, but I promise you it isn't. Find an AD that you know and you trust, and treats you the way that you should be treated. When we get into the luxury watch game, we're spending a lot of money on watches. Believe me, I've got some expensive watches, and I'm extremely lucky to even have purchased these or looked at these watches. And it's important that when you go into a store, and I'm not plugging Chisholm Hunter, I'll just use them as an example though, that you get a glass of champagne, that you get a luxury experience, because you're buying a luxury product. There is nothing worse than when you go into an AD with money to spend, whether that's £500, £5,000, £10,000, whatever it is. There's nothing worse than when you walk in and they look down their nose at you. And that is so, so wrong. And that's something that, I'll say this again, I know it's starting to sound like a plug, but it's genuinely not. It's just from experience. Chisholm Hunter are amazing at. They sit people down, they give them a glass of champagne, they talk about watches, they have some banter, and they have a real relationship with you guys, with the watch community, and I think that's a fantastic thing. I'll never forget, when I'm in my spare time, I kind of dress down. I dress in trackies or cargo trousers, a black t-shirt, and a hoodie. That's kind of just how I dress. That's how I normally cut about. And I went into an AD in Glasgow. I'm not going to name them. I went to an AD in Glasgow with these tracky bottoms on, with that hoodie on. And yeah, maybe I wasn't dressed up, but I was looking to buy a watch. And I walked into the store, and quite literally no one would speak to me because I was dressed the way I was. They judged a book by its cover. And I think that's really, really wrong. And that's somewhere that, without sounding like a broken record here, Chisholm Hunter are really amazing at. Next up is probably one that you're all going to kill me for. And you know what? I don't care, because this channel is about speaking my mind and from my experience. It's pick a budget and don't stick to it. Right, yes, I know what you're thinking. Why pick a budget if you're not going to stick to it? And it's a great question, and it's one I've been pondering since I've started this video. But the thing is, I think that if you have an emotional attachment to something, if you have an emotional draw and you're getting something out of sentimentality, then don't be confined to the budget that you pick. Yes, roughly stick to that budget, and these watches are very expensive. But for the sake of just going slightly above or slightly below, it could go both ways, and it has for me, for something that you're going to have forever, that you might pass down through the generations, that you might give to your children and your children's children, it might be worth just paying that little bit extra for that little something special. I guarantee you won't regret it, because I certainly haven't. Last, but certainly not least, we have enjoy the journey. You know, part of the reason why I love this watch community, part of the reason why I love talking to you guys is because we've built a really respectful community. And everyone on this channel is so incredibly helpful and incredibly kind. And it gives me real joy talking to you guys, talking to you about your watch journeys, talking to me about what I'm doing in my watch journey. And I think the joy that this hobby can bring outweighs the joy of the watches. I think the watches are part and parcel of this hobby, but the actual joy of just talking to people, of communicating, of going to events and bonding over a passion outweighs everything else. So enjoy your journey. Thank you so much for watching this Chisholm Hunter episode. My name is Harrison, as always. Remember that we do have an After Hours Club, a VIP section of this YouTube channel. If you go to the homepage and click join, you get exclusive content. If you want to follow us on Instagram, to follow Drew and I and see more cool watches, then head to Chisholm Hunter Watches. Should have seen that one coming. And I'll see you in a couple of days.